there, Buttercups. Your resident T-Bell here. Welcome to Hark, 'tis the T-Bill. Let's dive in for that tea today, huh? Dear Buttercups, we have wandered through the grand love stories of the time. We have dissected declarations, dances, and dazzling confessions. And yet, there remains one canvas still untouched. We have not yet stepped fully into the world of Mr. Benedict Bridgerton. But perhaps that is fitting. Because this episode is not about arrival. It is about anticipation. It is about the charged silence before the confession. The glance that lingers half a second too long. The season before the season. Waiting is not empty. It is active. It is building. It is charged with possibility. What if the most romantic part of any story is not when love is declared, but when it is forming? When nothing has happened yet and everything is about to. Today we explore the in-between with some romantic analysis, and emotional intelligence, and a touch of longing. Not as a delay, but as design. Dopamine and delayed gratification. So let's talk about dopamine first, okay? It's a neurotransmitter made in our brain, and it acts as a chemical messenger that communicates messages between our nerve cells in the brain and the rest of our body. Okay? It also acts as a hormone. So let me just tell you how involved it is in our whole system. Okay, it's very important, and it is involved in movement, memory, pleasurable reward, and motivation. Motivation. I know. Motivation. All right. Behavior and cognition, attention, sleep and arousal, mood, learning, lactation. Okay. Now, it plays a small role in the fight or flight responses we feel and is known as the feel good hormone. It gives us a sense of pleasure. It also gives us the motivation to do something when we're feeling pleasure. Dopamine is a part of our reward system. This system is designed from an evolutionary standpoint to reward us when we're doing the things we need to do to survive, such as eating, drinking, competing to survive and reproduce. As humans, our brains are hardwired to seek out behaviors that release dopamine in our reward system. When we're doing something pleasurable, our brain releases a large amount of dopamine. You feel good and you seek out more of that feeling, right? Unfortunately, this is why junk food and sugar are so addictive. They trigger the release of a large amount of dopamine into our brain, which gives us the feeling that we're on top of the world and we want to repeat this experience. Now, how might I feel if I have the right amount of dopamine? Well, if we have the right balance of dopamine, we'll feel happy, motivated, alert, focused. Okay? So what happens if there's a low dopamine level? Well, you may feel tired, unmotivated, unhappy. You also may have memory loss, mood swings, sleep problems, concentration problems, a low fun time drive. Okay. And there are some diseases that could be associated with low levels of dopamine. Okay. That could be ADHD, Parkinson's disease, and restless leg syndrome. Restless legs syndrome. Woohoo! Now, let's say you have a high amount of dopamine, higher dopamine levels, right? Well, you'll be euphoric and energized. You'll have a high fun time drive. But there are some negatives to having high levels of dopamine. That means you may have trouble sleeping. You might have poor impulse control. You might be a little bit more aggressive. And there are some diseases associated with having higher levels of dopamine, and that's mania, obesity, and addiction. Now, diseases associated with both high and low levels of dopamine could be schizophrenia. Some symptoms of schizophrenia can possibly be caused by having too much dopamine in certain areas of your brain, delusions and hallucinations, And other symptoms are possibly caused by not having enough dopamine in another part of your brain, lack of motivation. So, dopamine is super, super important, right? Now, we're going to jump to the more fictional part of this, right? But to talk about the dopamine, remember how we said that dopamine is the thing that it's like a reward center and it makes us happy? It's the feel good hormones. Well, it's worth noting that slow burns create a deeper emotional investment, right? So that could trigger your dopamine. Now, why is that? Because time equals attachment. When we invest in a story forming in front of us, we sit with that longing. We watch people or characters grow separately and together. Now, for example, how invested does one get when it comes to Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy? Okay? And you've heard me talk about them. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that either in the 1995 version or the 2005 version, I still get excited when I realize that they're going to get together. Now, I've seen these movies more times than I can probably count on one hand, right? But that doesn't matter. I'm so excited to see them get together, right? Now, what about, I'll go modern for you because why not? Booth and Bones on the TV show Bones. Now, in the first episode, you see them pretty much not getting along, and that's okay because they've worked together, they not liked it, and this is the first we are seeing of it, right? However, we get the time to notice micro shifts, glances, softer tones, maybe a hand lingering too long, maybe that tension building because there was tension for Booth and Bones, and there was also tension for Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, right? Psychologically speaking, delayed gratification is a strength, because it strengthens reward pathways. When payoff is postponed, our brains release dopamine in anticipation rather than just at the reward itself. The longer the build, the more meaning we attach to the eventual moment. This is why a relationship like Bridgerton's Colin and Penelope, or Elizabeth and Darcy, or Booth and Bones feels monumental. We've earned it, haven't we? Right alongside of them. Our investment grows through patience, right? Slow burns don't just show love, they let us participate in its becoming. Now, if you've ever watched Bones, okay, and I recommend that you do, you'll know that Tempest Brennan and Celie Booth take many seasons to see what we can see as the audience, right? Tension creates cognitive friction. Our brains are wired to seek resolution. When something is resolved, we predict outcomes, we scan for clues, we rehearse possibilities. It activates our problem solving mode. The mind doesn't like open loops, it wants closure, right? And I can attest to this because there are so many times we have in life, and for me especially, that we want a remedy, we want a resolution, we want to fix a problem. But sometimes we don't need to fix it in that moment. This is why cliffhangers work. It's why eye contact that lasts half a second too long feels electric. Tension keeps us mentally leaning forward. Without tension, we consume. With tension, we engage. And y'all, the anticipation we are allowed to imagine is wild. Many imaginations have most definitely exceeded reality. Why? Because imagination has no constraints. See, reality is specific, anticipation is infinite. When we anticipate, we fill in gaps with our ideal versions. We remove the awkwardness, timing issues, and human flaws. We amplify the emotional high. Now, in psychology, this is called affective forecasting. We often overestimate how good or bad something will feel. Anticipation can stretch into perfection because it isn't bound by logistics. Anticipation is curated, reality is edited by life. And I can very much understand this as when you have a sudden change in something, you very much look forward to, or at least I do, you look for where it could go wrong. Not because you want it to go wrong, not at all. You look for it because you want to know how to fix it and if something does happen. And in your mind, when you notice all the signs that something can happen, you are now trained to say, okay, how can I go ahead and just make everybody aware, right? Now, we can watch season after season where nothing big has happened, right? But the foundation is continuing to grow. It's still perfect. And how can I say that? Because it hasn't had the chance to disappoint us yet. In the realm of possibility, there is no miscommunications. There is no imperfect timing. There's no unintended consequences. The imagined moment exists in its most idealized state. It's untouched, it's untested, it's untangled. It is emotionally pure. Perfection often lives in potential, not execution. The way that a story can inspire speculation, theories, edits, rewatches is amazing to me. I imagine that fans of any show have created many group chats, groups, stories rewritten in different POVs. There's so much that they're reimagining. And I can also imagine that there are many theories that are circulating for any particular show that you watch. Now, I know this to be true because I can personally say that I have done this very thing as I watch my shows, my movies, things like that. Okay. And honestly, are we even human if we don't try to do this? Now, let's really dive into the writers, okay? Because without writers, we wouldn't have this fiction that we so love, would we? No TV shows, no books, no movies, no nothing. Well, you know the great thing, one of the most wonderful things about being a writer is you don't have to be perfect. You can be imperfect. You simply need an idea and the dedication to put it from pen to paper, right? To me, writers are masters of the almost said. Sometimes the silences, pauses, and unresolved arcs that frustrate us in the moment may be the pot of gold that we find at the end of the rainbow after a bad storm. So let's just kind of dissect this a little bit. So the silence that they use, when a character doesn't respond, the absence speaks louder than the dialogue. The pauses that they have, the interruptions mid sentence, such as, say it, I can't. The dash does more work than the paragraph. It it emotes to us so much emotion because why can't they say it? And if you've watched whatever it is, then you know that there's something to it, right? The unrelated, the deflection. A character changes the subject during a vulnerable moment. That avoidance signals deeper emotion than confession would, right? So if you're talking and they change that subject, you know that you've hit a nerve. The subtext of it all. What is meant but not spoken? Think of longing conveyed through restraint, a technique perfected in period dramas like Pride and Prejudice, where a flexed hand carries an entire love confession. Now, we all know where that flexed hand comes in, okay? And when we watch that scene in Pride and Prejudice, We sit there and in our minds, that is irresistible. And the negative space. So there are scenes that end before a resolution is had, conversations that stop before clarity is realized. That silence forces the audience to participate. We fill in what isn't there, and what we fill in becomes ours. The pot of gold containing silences, pauses, and unresolved arcs is actually more powerful than one might think originally, because unfinished stories stay alive. The idea of the what ifs and the different paths available to us can provide either madness or daydreams, or both, but let me clarify. Possible different paths and many what ifs are very interesting. Why? The idea is that you are not the only one thinking or believing that alternate paths and all those what ifs exist, right? And this can lead a person to expressing those thoughts through a book, a movie, a TV show, music, right? Which means to me that sometimes a story or something that will become amazing and seen by millions starts as something as simple as a what if, right? Now, once a story concludes, it becomes contained. It becomes possibilities that are narrowed now, right? Because there's no infinite possibilities. Its meaning is more settled. But those incomplete stories, they're continuing to evolve in our minds. We rewrite them, we imagine alternate endings. And I can personally attest to the fact that when you have those what ifs, you can sit down and you rewrite things the way that maybe you had preferred them to go, but they simply did not go. But when you have the final say, the final, this is it, this is, I've done everything I can, and there are no what ifs left, then it's done. There's no more possibilities. It's settled, it's contained. There's also the psychological phenomenon of the Zeigarnik effect. We remember unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. Incomplete narratives can remain cognitively active. And that makes sense. Because how many times, I'm sure, has somebody said, hey, I have to go do the laundry or finish this task at work? Okay. And then you say, oh no, I got to go finish it. It stays on your mind. But that task you finished, hey, I did dishes, but that's not what you're thinking about right now, is it? Or I finished this report, 2 days ago. I'm not going to remember it until somebody asks me. It's not actively on our mind, right? Completion brings satisfaction. Incompletion brings obsession. We are not addicted to endings. We are addicted to becoming. And let's just dive into the role of liminal space in storytelling. Liminal space is the threshold, not the beginning, not the end, the hallway between. In storytelling, liminal spaces suspend characters between identities, strip away certainty, force transformation. They are the emotional waiting rooms, right? Now, think of the ballroom scenes in Bridgerton. The dance floor isn't just a setting, it's a liminal space. Two people circle each other, not yet declared, not yet defined. The air is charged because they are suspended between what is and what could be. Liminal spaces matter because transformation requires discomfort. Growth requires disorientation. Desire requires distance. We use liminality because change is never instantaneous. It happens in corridors, train platforms, letters unsent, glances not acted on. Story lives in the threshold. Now, there's so much um, interest in the slow burn trope in romance. The slow burn is emotional edging, narratively speaking. And it works. But why? Because it maximizes anticipation. It increases perceived stakes. It makes small moments monumental. When two characters take time to arrive at love, every little detail is loaded. And what do we mean? Which details are we talking about? We're talking about a hand brushing, a nickname softening, jealousy flickering before realization. Who does that sound like? And that's amazing to me. The delay builds a narrative equity. We feel like investors watching the market rise, and neurologically, anticipation releases dopamine. Remember, we talked about dopamine. The waiting becomes pleasurable. By the time the payoff comes, we've already experienced dozens of mini rewards through longing. Now, compare that to instant attraction. It satisfies curiosity, but it rarely deepens attachment. Slow burns let us fall in love alongside the characters. It's not just will they, it's when they do, it will mean everything. And then let's go into another archetype that we find irresistible. Okay, it's the artist archetype. And there are three intoxicating things that this archetype does represent. Okay, let's go with number one, the emotional depth. Oh goodness, artists are portrayed as people who feel intensely, and we are drawn into intensity. It promises passion. And isn't that true? Artists have to be seen as feeling intensely, because how do you dedicate yourself to such an art, whatever it might be, without that intensity, right? Mystery. They are often withheld. They withhold themselves from people, right? They observe, they create quietly. Mystery invites projection. We can imagine what they are thinking, and we can romanticize their interior world a little bit more, because we have the imagination to look into it, because they're not telling us everything, are they? And creation. Artists make something from nothing that feels almost divine. They turn pain into beauty, longing into canvas, and chaos into melody. In romance, the artist is compelling. Why? They notice what others overlook. They immortalize love through creation. And they blur the line between muse and partner. So let's look at stories like The Picture of Dorian Gray. The artist becomes both creator and destroyer, fascinated by beauty but haunted by obsession. This duality is compelling. This artist archetype feels dangerous but tender all at once. And perhaps most importantly, artists live in that liminal space by nature. They observe more than they act. They hover between reality and imagination, which, if we're being honest, is exactly where slow burn romance thrives. And who does this sound like? Maybe a certain Bridgerton son that finds or is seeking his lady in silver? We have talked about fictional waiting like it's romantic, but what if it's training? What if the slow burn on screen is preparing us for the slow burn in our own lives? In fiction, clarity rarely comes quickly. Confessions happen after misunderstanding, distance, almost loss. The waiting sharpens awareness. Characters start noticing what they truly feel. Silence and ambiguity force introspection. In real life, waiting for clarity can feel like rejection or confusion, let's be honest. But sometimes, clarity requires emotional maturity first. We can't rush awareness, either ours or somebody else's. The moment a character finally understands their heart usually comes after they've sat in uncertainty. Maybe we don't wait because nothing is happening, Maybe we wait because something inside us is forming. And sometimes side characters feel invisible until their story unfolds, which means that we're really waiting for our season, right? Many protagonists begin overlooked, underestimated, or misunderstood. Narrative timing matters. Every character who steps into the spotlight first had to exist in the background. Background seasons are developmental seasons. Obscurity builds resilience. Hidden time builds skill, identity, and strength. Waiting for your season doesn't mean you are behind. It means your arc is still building, which means that we have to trust that something great is coming for us, right? And here's something I've always believed. I may have a great vision for something, but what if God, the universe, everybody up there has something so much more great, something more amazing that I even could consider? And this is why my season hasn't come, right? That means that they're building something, and it's probably greater than I will ever even consider to think of. And waiting for change, your growth, your recognition, it's rarely cinematic, okay, in real time. Growth is not something that is always shown outwardly as much as it is quietly, because most transformations are quiet. Characters often endure long stretches of nothing before breaking through to the something. In real life, though, recognition often follows invisible work. Change happens internally before it becomes external. Growth requires repetition, not revelation. So essentially, you have to do the work before recognition will come. Change will happen within you before it's seen externally, because you need that repetition, basically building a good habit, right? And fiction teaches us that waiting doesn't mean stagnation, it means preparation. The training montage isn't glamorous. Let's be very honest. The waiting period isn't flashy, of course, but no breakthrough can happen without it. Everyone who steps into the spotlight first had to exist in the background. We can't all be instant stars, can we? There is something strangely beautiful about not knowing how it ends. And it shows that speculation is a creative participation. When we don't know what happens next, we imagine, we create theories, we fill emotional gaps with possibility. And anticipation actually makes the audience co creators. When the ending isn't written yet, we get to dream it. Not knowing expands the possibility of limiting it. And anticipation actually really does bond communities. See, fandom, speculation threads. Think about that. The group chats dissecting scenes, collective countdowns. Anticipation is a communal energy. When a show pauses between seasons, like, Bridgerton, which comes out February 26th, as far as I know, like waiting period times often become a vibrant thing as much as their release itself. Theories fly, edits are made, and guess what? Discussions deepen. And waiting becomes shared oxygen. The joy of having something to look forward to is monumental. Anticipation stretches joy over time. It gives ordinary days an undercurrent of excitement. It creates emotional forward motion. Looking forward is a form of hope. And this is where hope can come in. Waiting gives us time to reflect, to ask what we truly want, time to imagine, to envision possibilities beyond what is currently visible. and time to become ready emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Maybe the reason unfinished stories feel powerful is because we are still living ours. We are not behind. We are mid arc. Not knowing it doesn't mean it isn't coming. It just means the story is still being written. And sometimes, though it is the hardest part, it is the most delicious. Some moments are worth the wait. Some need the wait to make sense. Darcy and Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice really needed the wait. They were separated by pride, by misunderstanding, and by timing. The letter scene, and let me recap this for you. He writes a very long letter and he explains the circumstances of which he knows Wickham and why he doesn't like Wickham. And this allows clarity for Elizabeth to understand that he's not just a mean guy, he's protecting his family, especially his little sister. And this is the scene where anticipation shifts into clarity for Elizabeth, right? And so the wait allows both characters, Elizabeth and Darcy, to grow before their union. Sometimes the wait is character development in disguise. And some people are worth the wait. Benedict Bridgerton. Okay. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything, but what does he represent? He represents the overlooked sibling. He represents the artist waiting for a purpose. He's not a man yet in his season. Some characters are written to ripen slowly. One thing about Benedict Bridgerton that we have seen thus far is that he doesn't feel like he has a purpose. And so he decides to just enjoy himself because there is no purpose. He has nothing anchoring him, right? And he's just waiting to be ripe, and he's not ripe yet. I leave you with this. What are you waiting for right now? Does it feel like delay, or does it feel like development? And I implore you to consider, does anticipation actually train us to love longer? Some moments are worth the wait. Some confessions require distance. Some clarity requires silence. Some love stories must ripen before they are revealed. Elizabeth and Darcy could not have met in the middle without growth. Artists cannot create without first observing, and some characters, perhaps especially the quiet ones, are written to unfold slowly. Maybe you are in a liminal space right now. Maybe you are waiting for clarity, waiting for recognition, waiting for your season. What if it isn't delay? What if it is development? Unfinished does not mean forgotten. Unfinished means forming. Unfinished means alive. Perhaps the most romantic thing about a story unfinished is that it still belongs to possibility. So I leave you with this. What are you waiting for right now? And does it feel like emptiness or preparation? Until next time, dear buttercups, stay curious, stay patient, and trust the in-between. Buttercups, I thank you for listening and for being a part of this journey with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have a great week ahead. Now, should you have any questions, comments, or, maybe future topics, you can email me at harktistheteabell@gmail.com. You can locate me on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube. And please remember that this is a one-woman show. So, as we go on this journey together, you are growing as I grow. But until next time, buttercups.